Pull up a chair, close every other tab you were about to swipe to, and let me put you on to what just happened at the BET Hip Hop Awards. Because Cardi B did not just perform last night, she walked onto that stage, torched the entire building to the ground with a diss track aimed at another woman, and then, hours later, got on Instagram Live and did something so shocking, so unexpected, so completely against everything her fanbase has ever known her to do. That Bardigang is currently in a state of collective whiplash. And I mean that literally. Because the same woman who has spent the last 3 years telling anybody who ever crossed her exactly where to kick rocks got on live last night and begged her own fans to leave Bia alone. Not warn them. Not politely ask them. She literally begged them. She said, please. She said, stand down. She said, I don't want her to have a bad day. And when I tell you the internet lost its mind, I mean the internet lost its entire mind, because the thing nobody is talking about, the thing everybody is scrolling past because they're too busy dragging that girl, is what Cardi B actually revealed about herself in that moment. Because between the please stop bullying her and the I really went through that in 2018, she accidentally dropped one of the most revealing confessions of her entire career, and by the time you finish watching this video, you are going to look at the whole beef, the pretty and petty performance, and Cardi's entire 2026 rollout completely differently than you did 5 minutes ago. Because this isn't a story about a diss track. This is a story about the exact moment a superstar realized her own weapon was about to blow up in her hand. Let's break this whole thing down piece by piece. So here's where things get interesting. For anybody who has somehow managed to miss the last 18 months of hip-hop's messiest slow-burn feud, let me catch you up in about 90 seconds, because you need the full backstory to appreciate what just went down on that live. Rewind to March of 2023. A rapper named Bia dropped a song called I'm That B Word, and on that track she sampled a Missy Elliott beat, a very specific, very recognizable, very ownable Missy Elliott beat. Now, most people, myself included, played that record, nodded our heads, kept it moving. But this woman? She clocked that beat like it was a piece of her intellectual property. Fast forward to 2024, and Cardi B, the biggest female rapper of her generation, a woman who does not need to borrow anybody's anything, released her single, Like What, and on that record, she used the exact same Missy Elliott flip. Same beat, same texture, same energy. And Bia felt some type of way about it. Publicly, loudly, immediately. Now, if that was where this ended, two artists squabbling over a sample, nobody would care. Nobody would remember. Nobody would be here right now watching this video. But this is where our girl on the other side of the beef made the decision that turned a beat dispute into a full-blown war. Because we're traveling through the industry, and I am telling you this is not my speculation. This was being whispered from studio to studio, from A&R meeting to A&R meeting. The whisper making its way through the culture was that she had started running around telling anybody who would listen that she had a tape. Not just any tape. Bia was allegedly claiming she had video evidence of Cardi B cheating on Offset. Take a second and sit with that. Because you have to understand, the moment you start telling grown people in the music industry that you have that kind of ammunition on somebody at Cardi's level, you have declared a level of war that most artists cannot afford to fight. And this woman, this is important, did not blink. She did not hide. She did not go on Instagram crying about how she was being victimized. In signature Cardi fashion, she went public and issued a direct legal threat. She said, produce the tape or produce it in court. She told the other woman, if you keep talking about me like this, I am going to sue you for defamation, and you are going to have to show a judge the same evidence you have been showing your friends. And this is where the story cracks wide open. Because when Cardi B called the bluff, when she pulled the actual legal trigger, Bia went silent on the tape. No tape was ever produced. No screenshots. No timestamps. No corroboration. Nothing. Which, for those of you keeping score at home, is what we in the analytical community call receipts that do not exist. But our girl on the challenging end was not done. She doubled down in a different direction. Instead of the tape, she dropped a diss track called Sue Me. And on that record, she went places that, even by rap beef standards, were considered scorched earth. She rapped about Offset allegedly cheating in their own home. And Bia, this is the part that changed the entire temperature of this feud, mentioned Cardi's children by name. Her actual, breathing, minor children. By name, on a diss track. Uploaded to Spotify. Streaming to millions. And that right there is the exact moment this situation stopped being a beef and started being a blood feud. Because there is a rule in rap. There has always been a rule in rap. You can go after somebody's bars, you can go after somebody's chain, you can go after somebody's outfit, you can go after somebody's whole entire lifestyle. You do not go after their kids. That is the one line. That line got crossed, and Cardi B, for a woman famous for reacting in real time, did something almost more terrifying. She went quiet. Not scared quiet. Predator quiet. The kind of quiet that ends careers. Let me tell you what happened next, because the answer to what she was doing during that silence is the whole reason we are here today. She was in the studio. She was crafting. She was writing what would eventually become the diss track that dropped on her latest album, the track called Pretty and Petty. And Cardi did not just write a diss track. She wrote a diss track that has become one of the biggest cuts on the entire album. It is not a throwaway. It is not a filler. It is not a punchline record. Pretty and Petty is genuinely a hit, the kind of hit that gets played at parties, in gyms, in the club, on the radio, in TikTok edits, and it is a hit that just so happens to have Bia's name embedded in its DNA. And that right there is the surgical genius of what our girl did. She did not need to say the other woman's name in every bar. She did not need to threaten her. She did not need to escalate. Cardi B turned an entire cultural moment into a diss track that will outlive the beef. And every time somebody plays Pretty and Petty in 2027, in 2028, in 2029, every single time, that other career gets dragged along with it, whether the other woman wants it to or not. Which brings us to last night, the BET Hip Hop Awards. She took that stage, and if you have been paying attention to this artist for the last year, you already know she does not do a lot of televised performances. She has said, publicly, that TV performances give her anxiety. She has said she would rather perform for Putin, for Obama, for Kim Jong-un than perform on a camera-live BET broadcast. She does not lie about that. She genuinely gets nervous. She genuinely does not eat the day of a taping. She has told her fans more than once that a live TV camera makes her feel like she is about to physically be sick. So the fact that she agreed to do the BET Hip Hop Awards at all was already a statement. And the song she chose to perform? Not bongos. Not WAP. Not any of her chart toppers from earlier in her run. She chose Pretty and Petty. She chose the record about her rival. And she did not just perform it. Cardi tore the stage down. And within seconds of that performance ending, Bardigang, the most organized, most militant, most extremely online fan base in modern hip-hop, went to work. And when I say went to work, I mean they lit up the target's mentions, DMs, tagged photos, TikTok comments, Instagram lives, family pages, everything. It was the kind of coordinated digital assault that only Bardigang knows how to run. And that, y'all, is when the plot twisted so hard, I had to rewind the live 3 times to make sure I was hearing what I was hearing. Because Cardi B got on Instagram Live. And this woman, who has famously never told her fans to stand down for anybody, ever, in the entire history of her being a public figure, got on live and told Bardigang, in the softest, most spiritually anchored voice you have ever heard from her, to please, please, please leave Bia alone. She said it 3 times. Please, please, please. And I need you to understand something about the emotional architecture of that live, because this is the part everybody is glossing over. She did not just ask Bardigang to stop. She invoked God. She talked about being anointed. She talked about how she was born blessed and how God had shown her over and over again that she was covered. She talked about the fear that if she took the fight too far, if she buried the other woman, in her own words, that God would punish not just her but her children, her seeds, her babies. And that right there is a Cardi moment that we have genuinely never seen before. That is not the woman who told Nicki Minaj to meet her outside a party. That is not the artist who threw a shoe. That is not the personality who once said she would slap the taste out of somebody's mouth on live radio. That is a woman who has been thinking. That is a woman who has been growing. That is a woman who, and this is the part one want you to really hear me on, has finally realized something that took most of her peers a decade longer to figure out. Let me put this in context, because you need a reference point to understand the size of what she just did. Rewind to 2016. Beyoncé releases Lemonade. Beyoncé sings, and I quote, "He better call Becky with the good hair." The internet did what the internet does. The Bayhive went into DEFCON 1. They hunted for Becky. They harassed people who had nothing to do with Jay-Z or Beyoncé. They turned an entire album cycle into a witch hunt. And Beyoncé, notably, said nothing. Beyoncé let the hive run. Beyoncé did not stand down. Beyoncé did not intervene. Because Beyoncé understood, at that stage of her career, that the hive doing the dirty work was actually part of the strategy. Now let me give you another reference point. Rewind further to the early 2000s. Ashanti and Nelly, the golden couple of an era, and the whispers, and the diss subliminals, and the way the industry handled that quiet loud feud. The artists in that generation understood that keeping fans engaged in the drama was a promotional currency. And you know what? For a long time, our girl was operating out of that same playbook. She has always understood that Bardigang is not just a fan base, they're a weaponized promotional army that can move numbers, move charts, move narratives, move careers. She has always let them run. Until last night. Because last night, our girl did something that Beyoncé did not do, that Ashanti did not do, that Nicki Minaj has never done, that Rihanna in her prime never did, and that almost no woman at this level has ever done in public. She stood in front of the weapon she herself had loaded, and she pulled the safety back on. And that right there is the whole story. That is what nobody is talking about. That is what the blogs are missing while they are busy running the Cardi B and Bia career headlines. Because the real headline is not that she ended anybody. The real headline is that she realized she could end her rival, and she chose not to. And I want to know what you think about that. Because there are two camps in the comments right now, and I have been reading them, and I am telling you both camps have a point. Camp 1 is saying, Cardi is being fake. This whole thing is a PR move. She knew exactly what she was doing when she performed the record, and now she wants to look like the bigger person while her fans do the dirty work. Camp 2 is saying, she is genuinely growing, she has kids now, she has been through her own war with the internet, and she does not want to be responsible for anybody else's mental health spiral. Drop your take in the comments. I am reading every single one, and I want to hear which camp you are in. Because here is the part that the surface-level commentators are missing entirely. What she did on that live was not just about her rival Bia. It was not just about Mercy. It was not just about Bardigang. What she pulled off was a 3-move chess play, and each move was calibrated to protect a different part of her brand. Let me walk you through it, because once you see it laid out, you will not be able to unsee it. Move number 1. She protected her image as a mother. Our girl, in 2026, is not the same personality who came up in 2017 talking Cash Money record on Instagram Live. She is now the mother of multiple children. She is now navigating a very public separation from Offset. She is now trying to establish herself as a serious cultural figure, not just a hitmaker. And the version of Cardi we are seeing in 2026 cannot afford to be the face of an internet bullying campaign against another woman, especially not another black woman, especially not another rapper. Especially not in a cultural moment where the pylon economy has become genuinely dangerous. When she invoked her children, when she said she did not want God to punish her seeds, she was not making a spiritual statement. She was making a legacy statement. She was telling the world, I am building something for my kids that is bigger than a beef. Move number 2. She neutralized the opposition without a single additional bar. Think about the mathematics of what our girl just did. By publicly asking her fans to leave Bia alone, Cardi did something absolutely surgical. She took the story out of the other woman's hands. Because now, any narrative the rival tries to spin, any live where she tries to say she is being bullied, any interview where she tries to play victim, any TikTok where she tries to rally sympathy is dead on arrival. Because the receipts are already out there. She literally, on video, told her fans to stop. And any future move from the other side now runs into a wall of, well, she tried to be the bigger person, why can't you? That is not mercy. That is not maturity. That is checkmate delivered in the language of grace. That, my friends, is elite-level narrative warfare, and if you did not catch it the first time, run that live back and watch it with new eyes. Move number 3. And this is the one that is going to age the best. Our girl just installed a permission structure for the next chapter of her career. Because here is what a lot of people do not realize about where she stands in 2026. She is not just a rapper anymore. She is negotiating with major brands. She is being courted for film and television. She is building the kind of empire that requires her to be palatable to a very specific class of gatekeeper, the same class of gatekeeper that dropped a certain other female rapper the moment she caught a bad news cycle. Our girl understands the landscape. She understands that in 2026, being cancelled is a whole industry, and being on the wrong side of a bullying narrative, even a bullying narrative you did not personally start, can cost you 8-figure deals. So at the exact peak of a diss track performance that she knew would go viral, she preemptively inoculated herself against the bullying accusation before the accusation was ever made. She did not react to the backlash. She previewed the backlash and dismantled it in advance. You catching this? Because this is not somebody stumbling into a mature moment. This is Cardi B, at 33 years old, in the 8th year of her mainstream run, deploying the kind of PR precision that most publicists cannot get their clients to execute after weeks of coaching. She did this in a 5-minute live, off the top, in what looked like an emotional confessional. That is either the smartest woman in hip-hop, or that is a woman who has finally been through enough war to know exactly what the next war is going to look like before it starts. But listen, sis. Let's get into the confession inside the confession, because Bia's presence in this whole story hangs on what our girl just admitted next. Because there was a moment in that live, and if you blinked, you missed it, where our girl said something that hit different than the rest of it. She said, and I am paraphrasing, but only barely, I went through that in 2018, in 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, when all these blogs was against me. When every single day was a bad viral tweet about me. And I need you to sit with that timeline. Because that is not a woman throwing out a random list of years. That is a woman who has kept a private ledger of every single year the internet came for her, and she can rattle them off from memory the way most people list their kids' birthdays. That is trauma. That is real trauma. That is the trauma of being the most viral woman in America for 5 straight years, and it is the exact reason Cardi was able to look at what Bardigang was about to do to Bia and see it not as revenge, but as a rerun of her own worst years. She was not defending her rival. She was defending herself for years ago, watching herself get dragged, and finally, having the power to stop somebody else from going through the same thing. And that changes everything about how you should read this moment. Because the internet narrative right now is that our girl is going soft. The internet is saying she is losing her edge. The internet is saying she is not the same fighter she was in 2018. And I need to correct the record right here, right now, on this video. She is not going soft. She is not losing her edge. She is upgrading her weapon. Because the version of Cardi from 2018 fought back with tweets and shoes and Instagram rants. The version of Cardi from 2026 fights back with hit records, with legal filings, with strategic silence, and with the kind of live confession that makes her look like the moral adult in every room she walks into. That is not softness. That is not evolution for the sake of evolution. That is a woman learning that in the long game of this industry, the one who looks like the grown-up wins. And I want to ask you, because I have been asking this in my own group chats and getting mixed answers, is Cardi B, in 2026, actually the most strategically intelligent female rapper of her generation? I know that is a loaded question. I know Nicki Minaj fans are going to fight me. I know Megan fans are going to fight me. I know Doja Cat fans are going to fight me. But look at the receipts. Look at her chart placements. Look at her brand deals. Look at her ability to navigate a public separation from Offset without losing a single fan. And now look at last night. Drop your honest take in the comments. And be honest. Now, let me pull back and talk about Bia for a second, because it would be irresponsible of me to spend 20 minutes talking about one side without acknowledging the woman on the other side of this. Our girl on the challenging end is in a very specific kind of trouble tonight, and I want to be clear about what kind of trouble it is, because it is not the kind most people think. The trouble is not that Bardigang is coming for her. Bardigang has always been coming for her. She has been surviving Bardigang mentions for over a year and a half at this point. She has developed a whole aesthetic around being the underdog rapper who does not need Cardi's approval. She has built a career, at least in part, on the friction of this beef. What she is actually in trouble for is much more dangerous. She is in trouble because her opponent just took away her narrative fuel. When Cardi told Bardigang to stand down, our girl did not just deflate the current pylon. She deflated the entire underdog storyline. Because you cannot be an underdog against somebody who is publicly asking their army to leave you alone. Bia's whole brand, I stood up to the biggest female rapper in the world. Positioning requires the other side to still be swinging. And with a single live, that sword got put down. Which means the challenger is now standing in the middle of the ring alone, with no opponent, holding a diss track that references children the industry has decided crossed a line by being referenced. That is not a comeback position. That is a career-defining problem. And here is what she should have done if we are being honest, and this is where the analysis gets real, because I have been in the media game long enough to tell you what a savvy publicist would have advised. She should have taken the Cardi live, clipped it, posted it with a 2-word caption like "Grace received," and moved on. She should have taken the gift that was just handed to her. Because a gift is exactly what got handed. Cardi gave her an off-ramp. She publicly, on camera, said, "I do not want to keep messing with you." That is the closest thing to a truce anybody in that position is ever going to get from somebody at this level. And if the challenger has the media instincts to take the off-ramp, this whole feud dies on the vine, and she lives to record another day. But we all know how this actually plays out. Bia is going to double down. She is going to go on live tonight or tomorrow and try to spin this. She is going to say something about how Cardi is a coward for telling her fans to stop, that Cardi should have kept the same energy, that Cardi is scared of her next record. And every single one of those posts is going to be the sound of her own career slowly deflating. Because you cannot beat somebody who has already stopped fighting you. You just cannot. That is not how the game works. That is not how the algorithm works. That is not how the culture works. Cut through all the noise, and here is what actually happened last night. Cardi did not just perform Pretty and Petty. She performed the funeral of the entire Bia beef, and then she stood over the grave on Instagram Live and asked her fans to please stop kicking the body. That is the image I want you to sit with. Because that is the image the algorithm is going to remember. That is the image the culture is going to remember. And that is the image that is going to define Cardi's 2026 rollout, whether she intended it to or not. Now let me pivot to something I do not think anybody else is going to bring up in their coverage of this. In that same live, she spent a genuinely surprising amount of time talking about her own anxiety around televised performances. She said, and again I am paraphrasing, but only barely, that she could perform in front of world leaders, in front of dictators, in front of presidents, and she would not be nervous. But put her in front of a live television camera and she genuinely cannot eat. She genuinely feels sick. She genuinely wants to throw up. And I want you to think about what it means for one of the most successful women in modern rap to publicly, on live, admit that a camera makes her physically ill. That is not a small confession. That is the confession of a woman who has been through the industry's most public flame wars, come out the other side, and is now, for the first time in her career, being honest about what those flame wars cost her body. On that live, she was not just protecting Bia. She was rehabilitating herself. She was telling her fans, in the softest voice we have ever heard her use, that the internet, the same internet that made her a star, has also broken her, quietly, over years, and she is tired of the pattern. And when she asked Bardigang to leave the other side alone, what she was really asking them to do was to stop feeding the pattern that had almost eaten her alive. That is the story. That is the actual story. That is the story none of the headlines are writing. And that is why this live is going to be studied not just by fans, not just by bloggers, but by publicists, by artist managers, by media strategy classes for years to come. Because Cardi B just wrote a new blueprint for how a female rapper survives the algorithm's cruelty. And she wrote it for free in 5 minutes, off the top of her head, on a random live after a BET performance. That is not a small thing. That is a generational thing. Now, before I close this out, let me be fair. Because I am not here to canonize anybody, and I am not here to fully bury Bia. Our girl still performed the record last night. She did not pull Pretty and Petty from the set list. She did not apologize. She did not offer a feature, a hug, a public reconciliation. She was very clear that if the other side ever ran up on her in the streets, it was going to be on site. She has not softened her actual stance. She has only softened the delivery. And that is a distinction that matters, because our girl is telling us, in her own words, that the war is not over, the war is just being fought at a higher altitude now. She is not making peace. She is making a strategic ceasefire. And ceasefires end. And when this one ends, if it ends, the record she pulls up next will be 5 times more surgical than Pretty and Petty ever was. Because the version of Cardi who wrote Pretty and Petty was angry. The version of her who writes the sequel, if a sequel ever needs to exist, will be calm. And calm Cardi is the version that nobody in this industry has ever had to fight before. Let me widen the lens one more time, because there is a bigger cultural moment happening around this that I want you to see. In 2026, the female rap ecosystem is more crowded than it has ever been. You have Cardi B. You have Nicki Minaj still moving at her own tempo. You have Megan Thee Stallion continuing to rebuild after everything she has been through. You have Doja Cat operating on her own frequency. You have Latto putting up hits. You have Glorilla growing an empire. You have Ice Spice, Sexy Red, Flo Milli, Mona Leo, and about 15 other names all fighting for the same limited real estate on radio, on playlists, on the culture's attention. And in that environment, the female rapper who wins is not necessarily the one with the hottest track. The female rapper who wins is the one who is the least amount of trouble. The one who does not require rehab campaigns. The one who does not require crisis PR. The one who does not require a brand partner to hold their breath every time she goes live. And she, last night, just made herself the least amount of trouble in the entire top tier. She just handed her PR team the best 5 minutes of tape they have ever gotten for free. That is the industry math. That is the industry algebra. And that is what Bia is up against, not just an artist, but a case study in how to survive a decade in this business without setting yourself on fire. And I want to hear from you one more time, because this is the debate I keep having in my DMs, and I want to settle it in the comments. Do you think our girl is genuinely growing as a person, or do you think she is the most calculated media strategist in hip-hop, and this entire live was a scripted move? There is no wrong answer, but I want you to be honest. Because the answer you land on says a lot about how you see this whole industry. Let me hit you with one more piece of context before we land this plane, and this is the piece I have been sitting on because I wanted to save it for the end. In the same live, our girl also talked about how she still gets nervous, how she still has to hype herself up, how she still has to remind herself she can do it. One of the biggest artists in the world admitted in real time that even now, at this level, the anxiety does not go away. And that, more than anything else she said, is what is going to make this live travel. Because for every woman watching who has ever felt like the world was against her, who has ever felt like the internet was actively rooting for her failure, who has ever felt like every viral tweet was a personal attack, she just spoke to them. She just said, out loud, that she has been there. She just said, out loud, that she is still there, sometimes. And in one live, our girl quietly rewrote her own brand from biggest personality in rap to biggest survivor in rap. And I am telling you right now, on this video, that is a much more durable brand than the first one. And I want to slow down here for just one more second, because there is a specific detail from that live that I do not think we have unpacked enough. And it is the part that separates the fans who think Cardi is playing a game from the fans who understand she is now playing an entirely different game than the one everybody thought she was playing. At multiple points in that live, she kept using one word, and if you were only half listening, you probably missed it. The word was blessed. She said the word blessed more times in 5 minutes than she has said it in 5 years of interviews combined. She talked about being blessed. She talked about her babies being blessed. She talked about wanting to stay blessed. And I want you to think about what that word does, spiritually, culturally, and strategically, in the mouth of a woman who came up in an era where female rappers were expected to be brash, hard, unbreakable, and secular. In one live, our girl softly repositioned herself as a woman of faith without ever giving a sermon. And that is a very particular kind of PR move, the kind that costs nothing to execute, the kind that opens doors in demographics that used to be closed, the kind that starts to build the bridge from tabloid figure to cultural elder. Because here is the truth nobody in your feed is going to tell you tonight. The female rappers who last, the ones who make it to their 40s and 50s and 60s still relevant, are almost never the ones who stayed at the pitch they debuted at. Missy did not stay Missy at max volume. Lauren did not stay Lauren at max volume. Queen Latifah did not stay Queen Latifah at max volume. The ones who last learn how to modulate. They learn how to save their loudest for the songs, and they let the interviews get quieter every year. And Cardi, last night, just started her modulation, on camera, on live, in real time. That is not a small moment. That is a woman stepping into the next phase. And I know some of you are going to say, sis, you are reading too much into it. It was just a live. She was just talking. And to those of you, I want to say, respectfully, that is exactly what elite media strategy is designed to look like. It is designed to look like it was nothing. It is designed to feel accidental. It is designed to be dismissible until, 3 years from now, you look back at the timeline and realize that this exact 5-minute live was the moment a hitmaker stopped being a hitmaker and started becoming a franchise. Because the biggest careers in this industry are not built on the moments that felt big at the time. They're built on the moments that felt small and then compounded. And on that live, our girl just made a compounding move. Watch what happens over the next 12 months. Watch which brands come back to her. Watch which award shows send her invites. Watch which movie roles start getting whispered next to her name. And then come back to this video in the comments and tell me I was wrong. And one last thing before we land this, because I do not want you clicking off without hearing the most underrated angle in this entire situation. Watch the industry's silence. Nobody at the very top of the game has said a word publicly about this feud. Not Beyoncé, not Nicki, not Missy, not Rihanna. And that silence is not an accident, it is a statement. When the biggest names in the culture refuse to weigh in, what they are really telling you is that they see the same thing we just spent this entire video breaking down. This is not two women beefing anymore. This is one woman quietly ascending, and the industry recognizes an ascension when it sees one. That silence, sis, is the loudest cosign our girl has ever received. So when the smoke actually clears, when the blogs stop running the Cardi tells fans to stand down headlines, when Bia finishes whatever countermove she is currently drafting, when Bardigang either listens or does not listen, when the news cycle rolls over onto the next celebrity mess, what we are going to remember about this moment is not the diss track. It is not the BET performance. It is not even the specific words used on the live. What we are going to remember is the exact second she stopped playing the game the way the game was designed to be played, and started playing a game none of her peers had thought to invent yet. She did not just win last night. She changed the rules of what winning looks like. And in an era where the algorithm rewards outrage, where the culture rewards cruelty, where the industry rewards artists who feed the beast every single week, she walked up to the beast and, with the softest voice, put it back to sleep. That is not weakness. That is not maturity porn. That is not fake humility. That is the sound of a woman who has been at the top of the mountain for 8 years, finally figuring out how to stay there for 20 more. Because in the end, she did not save Bia. She saved herself. And the only question left, the only real question that matters as we go into the rest of the album cycle, is this. Now that our girl has shown the industry she can play the long game with this much precision, who is next in her crosshairs? Because make no mistake, sis and Bia herself should be paying the closest attention of anybody. Our girl is not done. Our girl has an album to promote. She has a tour to book. She has a legacy to build. And based on what we just witnessed last night, she has clearly been thinking about her next move for a very long time. So the question is not whether she is still at war anymore. The question is who she has decided is worth going to war with next. And I have a theory. But I am going to save that theory for the next video, because it deserves its own breakdown, and I do not want to bury the lead in this one. So drop your take in the comments, because I want to know, was the live the smartest PR move of 2026? Or was it the moment we all watched a superstar genuinely level up as a human being in real time? Or, and this is the option nobody is talking about, was it both? Both can be true. Both usually are true. But I want to hear your version. I read every single comment, and the best ones are getting pulled into the next video. If you made it this far, you already know the drill. Hit the subscribe button, tap the notification bell, and stay locked in, because when our girl makes her next move, and she will make her next move, you want to be the first person in your group chat with the receipts. I will catch you on the next one. Sis, stay blessed, stay dangerous, and stay 10 steps ahead. Peace.